The word barbecue is over 500 years old, and it doesn't belong to Texas, the Carolinas, or Kansas City. It belongs to a group of indigenous Caribbean people the Spanish encountered in the 1500s, slow smoking meat on wooden racks over smoldering fire. That single tradition, born on a tropical island, would eventually travel across continents, absorb the techniques of 3 different civilizations, and ignite one of the most passionately debated cultural identities in American history. And by the end of this, you're going to understand why barbecue isn't just a way of cooking. It's a story about survival, identity, and who really deserves credit for one of the world's greatest culinary traditions. When Spanish explorers arrived in the Caribbean in the late 1400s and early 1500s, they encountered the Taíno people of Hispaniola, the island we now call Haiti and the Dominican Republic. The Taíno had a method of cooking they called barabicu. It meant something close to sacred fire pit or framework of sticks, a raised wooden rack, usually made of green wood so it wouldn't burn too quickly, positioned over a low, controlled fire. They used it to smoke and slow cook fish, game, and meat, infusing it with smoke while the heat did its patient work. The Spanish wrote it down phonetically. Barabicu became barbacoa, and from there, the word spread across the Atlantic world like smoke on the wind. Now here's the part that gets genuinely fascinating and a little complicated, because the technique the Taíno were using wasn't unique to them alone. Across the Americas, indigenous peoples had been cooking with smoke and low heat for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. The concept of slow cooking meat over fire, of rendering fat, of using aromatic wood to transform tough cuts into something transcendent, that existed on every continent in some form. But the Caribbean version was the one that got named, and naming something is how you claim it. So the Spanish take barbacoa west to Mexico, where it fuses with Mesoamerican pit cooking traditions. If you've ever had authentic barbacoa, slow-cooked beef cheeks or lamb wrapped in agave leaves and buried in a pit lined with hot coals, you're tasting that collision of cultures right there. That dish still carries the original word almost unchanged 5 centuries later. Think about that for a second. But let's cross the Atlantic now, because this is where the story gets even deeper, and there's a chapter in barbecue's history that doesn't get nearly enough credit. When European colonizers established plantations across the American South in the 1600s and 1700s, they brought enslaved Africans with them, people who came from culinary traditions that were extraordinarily sophisticated. West and Central African cooking had long embraced smoke, spice, and slow fire.
Techniques of building and managing a fire, of knowing exactly when coals had reached the right stage for low, steady heat. This was deep generational knowledge. Enslaved people on southern plantations were put in charge of the cooking, and specifically, they were given the parts of the pig that the plantation owners didn't want: the ribs, the belly, the shoulder, the hocks, the ears, the tough cuts, the forgotten cuts. And here is where something extraordinary happened. Through skill, patience, and centuries of accumulated fire knowledge, those cuts were transformed into something nobody could replicate any other way. Low heat, long time, wood smoke, the collagen in a pork shoulder breaking down over 12 hours into something silky and yielding, the bark forming on a rib rack, that perfect crust of smoke and rendered fat and spice, the flavors that only happen when you refuse to rush. This is the pitmaster's secret that changed everything. It was never about the best cuts of meat. It was about what you could do with the humblest ones, given enough skill and enough time. The whole point of barbecue, the philosophy of it, is transformation through patience. That understanding came directly from African culinary tradition, applied under the most unjust circumstances imaginable, and it became the foundation of American barbecue. Now fast forward to the 19th century, and something interesting starts happening across the American South. Communal barbecues become a fixture of social and political life. Politicians hold them to attract voters. Churches hold them to build community. Towns hold them to celebrate harvests. And regional identities start to crystallize around very specific styles. In the Carolinas, whole hog barbecue with vinegar-based sauce. In Memphis, ribs with a dry rub and a tomato-forward sauce. In Texas, beef brisket, because cattle country doesn't mess around, cooked over post oak with nothing but salt and pepper to let the meat speak. In Kansas City, a melting pot of all of these with thick molasses dark sauce. Each style is a fingerprint of a region's history. What animals were raised there, what wood grew locally, what immigrant groups settled and brought their spice preferences with them. German immigrants to Texas brought their smoked meat traditions, and you can still taste it in the way Central Texas barbecue honors the integrity of the cut above everything else. It's history you can eat. Here's the open question that drives the most heated arguments in barbecue today, and honestly, it deserves to be asked out loud. Who owns barbecue? The indigenous peoples who invented the method? The African cooks who perfected it under slavery and whose techniques became the template? The regional American traditions that codified it into specific styles?
The answer, truthfully, is that barbecue is one of the rare things in food culture that genuinely belongs to everyone who contributed to it, and that contribution should be acknowledged, not flattened into a single flag or a single state. What we do know is this: every time you smell wood smoke rolling out of a barbecue joint, every time you pull apart a smoked pork shoulder that's been in a smoker since before sunrise, every time you bite through that bark into meat that practically dissolves, you are tasting 500 years of human ingenuity, cultural exchange, and hard-won knowledge. That flavor didn't come from a recipe book. It came from people. The butcher's take on all of this: if you want to actually connect with this history in your own kitchen, start with the cuts that built barbecue: pork shoulder, beef brisket, beef short ribs. These are the cuts that require time, smoke, and patience, and they will reward you more than any expensive prime cut ever could. Use hardwood. Give it time. Respect the process, because that process has a history worth honoring. Barbecue isn't fast food. It never was. It's the opposite. It's the art of slowing everything down until something humble becomes something extraordinary. That's what a Taíno wooden rack over smoldering fire started, what centuries of African culinary mastery perfected, and what regional American culture carried into the modern world. If this changed how you think about what's on your grill, drop a comment. Tell me where your favorite barbecue style comes from and whether you've got a regional loyalty. I'd genuinely love to know. Hit subscribe so you never miss an episode, and next time, we're getting into the actual craft. We're going deep on whole hog barbecue, the technique, the heritage, and whether you can do it at home. You won't want to miss it.